My cheating wife wanted an open marriage, so I opened the door, kicked her out, and let karma handle the rest. My wife of 10 years, Linda, greeted me at the door when I came home from work on a Wednesday evening. She asked me to sit down at the table because we needed to have a serious conversation. Immediately, I thought, this sounds like the beginning of one of those difficult talks. As I took my seat, she began by saying she was sure I knew she loved me and would never do anything to harm our marriage. Her words immediately put me on edge. I replied, okay, but before I could say more, she cut in and took a deep breath. I knew things were about to go south. She went on, I love you, and I want us to grow old together, but I've made a decision. I want to have an affair. I was blindsided. It didn't sit right with me. Trying to understand, I asked, so let me get this straight. You love me. You don't want to damage our relationship, but you want to sleep with someone else? She replied, I wouldn't put it like that. I met someone I'd like to have a physical relationship with. It would only happen occasionally, and I promise to always be honest and transparent. I believe I love you enough that it won't affect how I feel about you. If you really love me like you say, you'll let me do this because I feel I have to. She said it with a confident smile. Still reeling, I responded, I don't understand why you feel this is necessary, and I really can't see how this wouldn't change things between us. Have you already made plans with this guy? Linda nodded. We're tentatively planning to go away next weekend. Then she asked me to be completely honest and posed a question. How would I react if she turned the tables and offered me the same arrangement? I knew answering honestly might trigger her, but I said, I'd be fine with it if you could guarantee it wouldn't hurt our relationship. She snapped back, you know damn well you'd have lost it if I brought this up. I scoffed, and she looked genuinely surprised. I honestly didn't expect this reaction, she said. I thought your love for me would allow me to do something I feel is so important. I replied, whatever you're thinking, it must be completely irrational. You really expected me to sit at home while you spend the weekend with another guy. She paused, then admitted, maybe I didn't think this through. You're right. I didn't consider all the factors, including my own emotions. I asked her directly, if I say no, are you still going to go through with it? She said, I honestly don't know. I never imagined you'd say no. I said, clearly we didn't plan this well. So here's what we're going to do. Give me a few days. Let's sit down again Sunday afternoon and talk it through after I've had time to think. That night caught me completely off guard. Feeling uneasy, I went into our bedroom and began moving my things into the guest room. Linda asked what I was doing, and I told her plainly that I didn't want to share a bed with someone who seemed more interested in another man than in me. I closed the guest room door firmly behind me. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but I did have time to think and I started forming a plan. I realized that if she went through with her intentions, there'd be no going back for us. The next morning, I left for work as usual without saying a word to Linda. Once I got to the office, I called in and requested the next 2 days off for personal reasons. Then I got to work on my plan. I purchased 3 voice-activated recorders, placing one near the phone, one in our bedroom, and one in her car. I also found a phone recorder that could connect to our landline. Next, I visited our cell phone provider. Since the account was in my name, I was able to obtain a detailed report of her call activity. Later that day, while Linda was still at work, I accessed her email. I found an account I hadn't known about, but the password was easy to guess. What I discovered confirmed my suspicions, though I was relieved to find she hadn't slept with him yet. I set the account to forward all future emails to me without leaving any sign. I also bought a couple of discreet GPS trackers small enough to hide easily. I planned to slip one into her wallet where she kept her cash and cards, and another into her car. By the end of the day, I had everything in place to monitor her closely. The only missing piece was direct access to her phone so I could check for messages, which I intended to do that night along with planting the GPS devices. Going through her email, I found several exchanges with a coworker named Franco Jones. He was the man at the center of all this, and I was ready to turn his world upside down, just as he had done to mine. The emails made it clear their weekend trip was going ahead no matter what I said. That Friday, I met with a well-regarded divorce attorney. I instructed him to begin proceedings, citing adultery and naming Franco Jones directly. The lawyer said the case would be straightforward with proper evidence. I showed him the emails, phone records, and explained I would soon have audio recordings. He seemed confident and prepared to get started immediately. When Linda got home that evening, I didn't say a word. I watched silently as she made dinner, then left to have a meal and a few beers at a local bar. When I returned, she tried to talk, but I walked past her, went straight to the guest room, and slammed the door shut. At that point, her only chance to salvage our marriage was to cancel her weekend with Franco, but I wasn't holding out much hope. I avoided her for the rest of the weekend until Sunday afternoon, when I finally sat down with her in the kitchen. We both took our seats, and I began by letting her know exactly how dissatisfied I was with her request. I told her that I had spent a great deal of time thinking it over and simply couldn't accept her request. I pointed out that, despite her insistence that it wouldn't affect our marriage, the damage was already evident. Seeing how upset she looked, I suggested that if she had considered things from my perspective, she might have been more empathetic. I explained that I had tried to understand her point of view, but found no positive outcome in it. So I told her I had no choice but to say no. "How can you be so selfish when you claim to love me?" she asked. I responded, "If anyone's being selfish here, it's you for wanting to be with someone else. And what if I go through with it anyway?" She challenged. I warned her there would be serious consequences if she engaged in any extramarital affair. 10 years earlier, we had both promised to be faithful. She replied, "I understand, but this is something I need to do." I ended the conversation by saying, "Then I guess there's nothing more to talk about. You really need to think this through." I picked up my laptop and left the house, heading to a nearby Wi-Fi hotspot to monitor their messages. She was furious, but that didn't stop her. She assured him she would leave no matter what I said. He responded enthusiastically, telling her he had already reserved room 125 at the Hilton in Kansas City for both Friday and Saturday nights. I quickly booked the same room for Thursday night to get ahead of them. They were making it too easy. They had even planned a romantic Saturday evening with dinner, dancing, and intimacy. Linda mentioned in one message that she had bought new lingerie just for the occasion. While keeping tabs on their emails, I grabbed something to eat and stayed vigilant. At that point, they weren't even discussing my objections anymore. They were fully immersed in planning their weekend together. The hotel check-in was at 3 p.m., and he planned to pick her up at 1 o'clock, wanting to arrive as early as possible given the 2-hour drive. I was surprised he intended to pick her up at our house. I still had to decide how I would respond to that. Meanwhile, I reserved a nearby room for the weekend, close enough to intercept all their communications. Over the next few days, I gathered all the necessary equipment, including 2 small fiber optic HD cameras. I intended to install them in the hotel room on Thursday, so I could capture everything that unfolded. This footage would serve as strong evidence in the divorce case. During that time, I kept my distance from her. But by Wednesday, I knew it was time to confront things one last time. I decided to offer her a final chance. If she still chose Franco, then that would mark the end of our marriage. I asked her to sit down with me for a moment. She didn't seem pleased, but agreed. I began by asking if she'd really thought this through. She said she had and confirmed she still intended to go through with the trip. She mentioned her weekend with Franco and said she hoped we could eventually move past this. I exhaled slowly and told her plainly that this was her final opportunity to change her mind. I urged her not to throw away our marriage for another man, and I reminded her of the consequences that would follow. Still, she remained resolute in her choice. I told her she had made her decision. She had chosen Franco over me. Then I stood up and left the room, closing the door firmly behind me, signaling that this was final. Our marriage was over, and someone was going to have to face the consequences. On Thursday morning, I went into work and requested the afternoon and the next day off so I could finalize my divorce preparations with Linda. My boss was understanding and supportive, granting me the time I needed. That afternoon, I drove to Kansas City, checked into the hotel room they had reserved, and installed all the surveillance equipment. I carefully ensured that each device was working correctly and positioned just right. After verifying the camera feeds on my laptop, I made sure they would activate when triggered and walked past their room down the hallway to confirm the signal range. Everything was functioning as planned. When I returned home, the weight of what I was about to do began to sink in. I had one final errand. I visited a gun store and purchased a small can of pepper spray, intending to sabotage their date. When I got back, Linda was in the kitchen, looking at me as if expecting a conversation. I walked past her without a word and slammed the door to my room. A few minutes later, she came in, trying to be pleasant. I cut her off, telling her to save the act for Franco. I wasn't interested in her sympathy. I turned my back to her, and she quietly left. That night, I slept fitfully, knowing everything would change the next morning. On Friday, I left the house at my usual time without speaking to her. I visited my lawyer's office and signed the divorce paperwork. I told him I'd have all the necessary evidence by Monday and requested that Linda be served at her workplace that afternoon. I also asked them to serve Franco at the same time, as I intended to file a lawsuit against him for alienation of affection. Later, I checked her GPS location and saw she was at a hair salon. While she was out, I returned home and opened her suitcase. Inside, I found the new lingerie she had mentioned undeniably attractive, though sadly not purchased for me. Wearing rubber gloves, I took out her new underwear and discreetly sprayed pepper spray on the crotch area of the panties and the cups of her bra, then placed them back in her suitcase. It would make for an interesting evening. Next, I went to the bank and closed all our joint accounts, transferring the funds to a new account in my name. I also canceled all credit cards tied to both of us. Feeling accomplished, I headed home around 12:30 to say my final goodbye. I knew she would be getting ready for her weekend with him. When I got home, the house was quiet. I assumed she was upstairs, and sure enough, I found her in the bedroom wearing some lingerie I had given her in the past. She tried to cover up, but I told her not to bother. I had seen it all before. She looked stunning with her fresh hairstyle, perfect makeup, and seductive lingerie. I couldn't help but comment on how beautiful she looked. Then I added how disappointing it was that she never made this kind of effort for me. She responded by saying she just wanted to feel good about herself today. I told her, "You look incredible, but it seems to me you care more about how others see you than you ever did about how I saw you." She responded with an apology, saying she just wanted to feel attractive. I sighed and reminded her that she had always been beautiful in my eyes. I told her how deeply I had loved her and that I believed, at one point, she had truly loved me too. As I spoke, I gently took the rings off her left hand. I explained that the wedding band I had given her symbolized our vow to remain faithful to one another, and that it carried deep significance for me. I told her how disheartening it was that it seemed to mean so little to her now. I added that I didn't want to see that ring on her finger while she was with another man, and that the engagement ring had belonged to my mother, something I intended to keep for sentimental reasons. I slipped both rings into my pocket. She looked surprised but said nothing. I told her that while I wouldn't be around when he arrived, I didn't want him in my house. I made it clear, if she allowed him inside, I would take serious action, and she'd regret it. I promised that he would not be stepping foot into my home. "Do you understand?" I asked. She replied, "Yes, I won't let him in." I nodded. "Good. Just know I'll be watching." She looked at me and asked, "Why are you acting this way?" I answered, "Because the person I loved most in this world destroyed that love. I hope this weekend is worth what comes after. Goodbye, Linda." Without another word, I turned and walked away from the woman who would soon no longer be my wife. She shouted something at me as I left, but I didn't care. I was done. I parked a short distance down the street, making sure she could see me. If he set foot in my house, I'd risk jail, but they would suffer far more. Soon, his car pulled up. He walked to the front door and rang the bell. Linda came out with her suitcase, gave him a long embrace, and kissed him passionately. As he picked up her bag, she looked directly at me with a smug grin. She got into the car beside him and shot me another smug glance as they drove off. I responded with a middle finger, and that wiped the smirk off her face. Later, I returned home, changed the locks, and reset the garage door code. I'd already packed my own suitcase, so I grabbed it and drove to Kansas City. After checking in, I set up my laptop and began monitoring the camera feed. From what I saw, it was clear they had already been intimate. The camera showed the foot of the bed, and it was obvious Franco hadn't lasted long. When he stepped out of the bathroom, completely naked, I couldn't help but laugh. He was woefully under-equipped. Linda had been used to far more than what this guy could offer. Franco climbed into bed beside her, ready to go again. She smiled and reached for him with open arms. I had to stifle another laugh as she reached for his unimpressive manhood. He didn't need to hold back. There was no way she could feel much of anything with what little he had. I thought to myself how badly she had miscalculated. He was clearly out of his depth, and from the look of mild frustration on her face, she seemed to be realizing that too. It looked like the weekend wasn't going to live up to her expectations. She would return home frustrated and be sent packing the next day. He was soon ready for another round, but it was just another disappointing 4-minute session. He had already finished 3 times, and she hadn't even come close. This was turning out better than I had imagined. I had to stop watching and went out for dinner and drinks, leaving everything recorded so I could gather the evidence I needed for the lawyer and show her what a poor decision she had made. When I came back, he was fast asleep, and Linda looked even more frustrated. I found it oddly satisfying. Once I had processed the pain of losing my wife, I went to bed thinking about how much fun I'd have messing with him the next day. I thought about some of the attractive women I'd seen at the bar and realized how soon I'd be free to pursue them. I fell asleep with a contented smile, knowing there was no more pain for me. My path was set, and I knew where I was headed. I woke up feeling refreshed and ready to have some fun. After a shower, I went out for a nice breakfast and grabbed some snacks, just in case I couldn't leave. Back in my room, I called a local florist and ordered a bouquet for Linda, similar to the ones I used to give her on our anniversaries. I wanted her to think about what she was risking, because there would be no more anniversaries. I arranged for the flowers to be delivered at 11 a.m. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. They left the room for a while, then resumed their romantic activities. Soon, they were both naked, and he had just started when there was a knock at the door. The florist arrived with the flowers, and Linda's face shifted from contemplation to anger. She grabbed her cell phone and called a number. My phone rang, and I answered it. "Hello, how are you?" I asked. "Not great," she replied. "My wife is out with another guy while I'm here, and I'm getting angrier by the minute." I responded, "Why do you care? I just received a bouquet of flowers, just like the ones you always give me on our anniversary. I was curious what you were up to." She seemed confused, and I continued, "I'm not sure how you think I did that. First of all, you and your brilliant boyfriend kept me in the dark about your plans. Second, if I had sent you flowers, they would have been ragweed with a note that said, 'To my cheating wife.' Not very nice, is it? But then again, neither was your brief encounter with Franco. Maybe the flowers will give you an idea of what you're throwing away." I noticed her expression shift in surprise as I ended the call. She immediately tried calling again, but I didn't pick up. She kept trying before eventually giving up. She told Franco what I had said, and he assured her I'd get over it. But that wouldn't happen until I got rid of her. Linda wasn't in the mood for closeness at first, but she eventually gave in. I decided to order pizza delivery and picked out her favorite. The pizza arrived just as they were getting back into things. Franco was upset and refused to pay, but the delivery person confirmed the room number and his phone number, even threatening to call the police. Franco reluctantly handed over the money. Since they had already paid, they decided to eat their lunch. After finishing their meal, they chatted for a while, but Franco's hormones got the best of him, and he tried again. Just as things were heating up, I called a sandwich shop and ordered her favorite sandwich for delivery. About a minute into their intimate moment, the sandwich arrived. When Linda saw it, she assumed I had figured out where they were. Franco couldn't believe it, but she spilled the beans about my sarcastic remark, claiming I had likely hacked into her new email and found the location there. It took her some time, but she eventually realized what was happening. She said I was quite clever and wouldn't have had trouble doing so. They decided to get dressed and go out for a while, planning to return, freshen up, and prepare for their romantic date. She later assured Franco that she would make it up to him tonight. Before they left, I couldn't stop laughing. I was in tears. When they returned, they showered and dressed, with Linda putting on some lingerie and giving him a little show. He tried to make a move, but she insisted on going out for a date instead. I wondered how long it would take for my little surprise to kick in. She finished getting dressed and looked great. I hoped my plan would work, as it would make for quite an entertaining spectacle. They left, and I settled in, looking forward to their return. They came back about an hour later, and Linda dashed into the bathroom to take a shower. She stayed in there for a while, and when she came out, her breasts and crotch were bright red. They seemed to be in pain, and it looked like little Franco wasn't getting any action that night either. Linda was crying on the bed when Franco tried to get frisky. She went off on him, saying she was in pain and wasn't interested right now. She chalked it up to an allergic reaction to her new lingerie. Little did she know, I had spent some time organizing my videos and creating DVDs for both my lawyer and Franco's wife. Once everything was ready, I called it a night. It had been a very successful day, and I couldn't help but smile. Trouble was brewing in paradise, and I was the cause of it. Sunday morning, I woke up and headed home. Linda was in for a lot of trouble when she returned, but by tomorrow, everything would be over. Later that day, Franco dropped her off without even walking her to the door. He just let her leave. I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a football game, and didn't notice her arrival. She announced that she was home, and I barely responded. She walked right in front of the TV, flashing me a sultry smile and saying she thought I'd be glad to see her since she wasn't dead. I asked her what had given her that impression and whether she thought I had suddenly become foolish. She replied that she didn't think I was foolish, but that my love for her was strong enough to overcome the circumstances. I retorted by saying that while I had once loved her deeply, that had changed the moment she left with someone else, despite my pleas. I expressed how I had poured my heart out to her, only for it to mean nothing. I admitted that once she left with him, I no longer cared whether she came back. She seemed taken aback by my words and said she couldn't believe I felt that way about her. I responded firmly, confirming that was indeed the case, and made it clear that she had made a significant mistake. She then asked if there was any chance we could move forward, promising to do anything to make things right. I replied with sarcasm, suggesting she get down on her knees and apologize. She protested, saying she couldn't do that. I agreed with her, admitting that I knew she wouldn't, which only deepened my doubts about the sincerity of her promises, just like her vow of fidelity when we got married. She told me she had been thinking about me all day and wanted to make love that evening. I responded coldly, "You need me?" "I don't think so." "Making love tonight?" "Not likely." "Did you have little Franco use protection whenever you were with him?" She replied, "No, he's married, but I can't have children." I continued, Do you think you're the only one he's been with? Are you damaged goods now? As far as I'm concerned, I won't touch you until you've gotten a clean bill of health from a doctor. Also, I don't do seconds. She snapped back, right? I'm going to use a rubber to sleep with my wife after she spent the weekend with some loser. Screw you. I replied, you chose little Franco over me. I'm going out for a while. I can't bear looking at your cheating self tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong. I responded firmly, we can talk about this tomorrow when you return from work. She said, I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and went to a nearby bar and grill to eat dinner and clear my mind. My mind was already clear because I knew exactly what I was doing. I just needed some distance from her. I don't drink much, so I had a meal and went for a long walk. When I returned home, she was in my bed. I gave her a stern look and told her to leave. She argued, claiming, this is our bed. I have the same right to be here as you do. I replied, the hell you do. You gave up that right when you got involved with little Franco. So get out of my bed or I'll take your belongings and throw you out on the street. She began crying and slowly exited the room, and I made sure to close and lock the door behind her. Her sobs were still audible as she walked down the corridor. The following morning, I completely ignored her. We had breakfast separately, and she left at her usual time. As she turned to go, she said, I love you. I gave her a cold, scornful look and replied, I loved you too, emphasizing that it was in the past tense. I saw tears well up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. Once she was gone, I began packing up her belongings into garbage bags. Then I reached out to Franco's wife. I asked if she was aware that her husband had spent the weekend with my wife Linda. She assumed he'd been away on business. When I offered to share copies of my evidence, she was very interested. I was surprised when she opened the door. She looked absolutely stunning. I stammered and had to apologize, blaming my hesitation on her beauty, which was entirely genuine. We got straight to the point, and I explained everything that had happened over the weekend. She was furious. We agreed to visit a lawyer together to see if he would represent her. The attorney agreed to take her case and even offered a discount. Rita began filling out the paperwork while I spoke privately with a lawyer. I asked if I needed to wait to serve Franco in order to protect her, but he assured me that as long as she signed the documents first, she would be protected. Afterward, Rita and I went to lunch while the legal documents were being prepared. Once she signed the papers, I dropped her off at home and returned to await her call. I was supposed to contact her that evening to update her on how everything went. Around 3 o'clock, my phone rang. She sounded visibly upset. What the hell is this? I was just served with divorce papers and Franco got served too. Something about being sued, she said. I answered calmly, everything seems pretty straightforward to me. I warned you there would be consequences for that weekend. You clearly didn't take me seriously. She replied, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I shot back, maybe you should have listened to me instead of believing everything little Franco told you. Let's not talk about this over the phone. We can discuss it when you get back here. Then I hung up. I tossed the garbage bags with her belongings into the front yard, all while filming the confrontation just in case I needed evidence for a restraining order later. When she pulled into the driveway and saw her things scattered across the lawn, she flew into a rage. She screamed incoherently, spit flying as she vented. I stayed calm and waited as she continued to yell, eventually forcing her way inside to start what would be our final conversation. If you want to talk, sit down so we can have a civil discussion, I told her. If not, I'll load your things into your car and you can go. She sobbed, I never imagined you'd do this to me. I replied firmly, do this to you? No. You did this to us. I warned you, pleaded with you not to destroy our marriage, but you did it anyway. Why would you ever think I wouldn't file for divorce? But you said you loved me, she whispered. I did. I loved you more than anything, I admitted. But you broke my heart. The real problem is that you never loved or respected me. I can't stay married to someone who thinks so little of me, no matter how much I still care. She asked, why do you keep calling him little Franco? I responded, because I had cameras set up in your room. I saw everything that happened over the weekend. So you can probably guess why I call him little. The first time I saw how unimpressive he was, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I even wondered if you could feel anything from that. I also noticed you didn't seem to be enjoying yourself the way you used to when we were intimate. She replied, what we had was real. I'll probably miss it. But I offered you a different perspective. Look at it this way. Now you're free. You can be with whoever you want, even a different partner every night. She shook her head and said, I don't want that. I want you. Only you. I suggested we go inside and sit for a few minutes. I apologized for my harsh words, explaining, I'm angry right now, But I want you to understand I would never physically harm anyone. The same can't be said for little Franco. We went inside and sat at the kitchen table, just like we'd done countless times before. The way the moment hit me, this would be the last time we ever sat together like that. She asked, "You wouldn't really hurt Franco, would you?" I answered coldly, "Why not? He destroyed what was once a happy marriage. I think he deserves more than a lawsuit and a divorce." "But he's not getting divorced," I continued. "His wife knows the truth and chose to let him go." She looked skeptical. "Do you really believe that? Or is it just a story to make me look bad so he can be with you?" I told her I spoke with his wife this morning. I showed her the evidence. He told her he was away on business. Now they're using the same lawyer we are, and yes, we even got a discount. She reflected quietly for a moment. "I wish you had just been honest with me." I challenged her. "And how would you have reacted if I had said I wanted to be with another woman?" "You'd have lost your mind." He knew his wife would never go along with it. And I doubt you even believe me now. That's part of why this marriage is ending. But honestly, I don't care what you believe. When you call him later, you'll learn that he's also been shown the door. She asked, "So you're actually kicking me out?" I confirmed, "Yes, I am." The night you told me your plan, I went into the guest room to think. Within the hour, I knew I wanted a divorce. By Thursday, I bought the equipment to gather proof and accessed your email. On Friday, I saw the lawyer and began the divorce process. She asked, "Why didn't you tell me what you were planning?" I might have reconsidered. "Is there any chance you'd forgive me?" I answered, "Linda, I loved you deeply so much so that forgiveness might have been possible. But you threw away your last chance last night. Maybe I could forgive you, but I'd never be able to trust you again. I can't live every day wondering when you'll crave someone else. It's better for us to end it now." She began to cry, unable to hold it back. I said, "Unlike you, I've really thought this through. Every time I did, I came to the same conclusion. I'm going to divorce you, and I'm going to make little Franco pay for what he did to my marriage. You can call him before you go. Maybe you two can figure out where to stay. Just don't try to use your credit card. I've already canceled them all. I left you half of our checking account balance, but I've removed my name from it. I'll also divide our savings equally. You can keep your car, but you'll be responsible for the payments. Take all your clothes and personal belongings. Once you find a place to stay, you're welcome to take whatever furniture you like, but the house stays with me. If I ever decide to sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you. Everything is outlined in the divorce papers. If you decide to contest it, I'll present all the evidence I've gathered, and it won't end in your favor. I prefer not to go down that path, but I will if I have to." She responded, "I won't fight it. This is all my fault. I just wish I could take it back." Trying to ease the tension, I joked, "Do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb?" She looked confused. "No, what?" I replied, "You can't have a romantic relationship with a light bulb." She didn't find it funny. I told her it was time to go and walked her out of the house. While she silently wept, I packed all her things into her car. When I was finished, I opened the car door and handed her one last item, her wedding ring, which I had flattened with a hammer. I told her it was now just scrap gold, but she could probably sell it for a decent price. After closing the door, I leaned in, kissed her on the forehead, and said my final words to her, "Goodbye, my love." Then I turned and walked back into what was now a lonely house. I didn't watch her drive away. I couldn't. My eyes were clouded with tears. I sat and cried for another hour until I was emotionally spent. It was time to think about my next steps. I saw 3 options. First, I could drown my pain in alcohol. But I'm not much of a drinker, and I hate the aftermath, so that wasn't realistic. Second, I could end it all and supposedly make everyone's lives easier, but I refused to give her that kind of victory. Third, I could hold my head high, knowing I'd done nothing wrong, and start rebuilding my life. There was one small consolation. The absence of Rita brought an unexpected smile to my face. I stood up straighter, still smiling, and called Rita. We made dinner plans for that evening, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was starting to heal. Maybe we'd just be friends. Maybe someone new would come into my life. But even then, the memory of her still lingered in my mind. Dear listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss future updates.